Friday. Thank you so much for coming. We're going to go ahead and start our final ground bag for the semester. And today we are happy to listen to two presentations. First is going to be by Shunhua Bai, who is the graduate research assistant for Dr. Jonathan Zhao. And our second presenter will be Bai Ziqi, and she is the graduate research assistant for Dr. Zhang. And each speaker will have roughly 30 minutes. And usually what we've done, you present for about maybe 20 minutes, and then we leave some time, like about 10 minutes for questions. So if that sounds good, let's go ahead and start.
Okay, thank you, Inessa. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shunhua Bai. Today, I'm gonna share you with a study that I'm doing with my advisor, Dr. Junfeng Jiao. The title, as you can see on the slide, is From Shared Mobility to Shared Responsibility, and crowdsourcing local knowledge of dockless mobility violations in our city. So a little bit about the research intuitions. So the first intuition is the huge supply gap between short distance traffic volume and the very limited available non-automotive travel options. So as we can see the comparison here, over a half of total trips generated in 2009 were less than 3 miles, and 60% of trips less than 1 mile were by automobiles. And also from the recently published NHTS 2017 statistics, it showed a similar result by over half of total trips were less than 4 miles. So as we can see here, the short distance travel demand is really high, but we are currently lacking options to satisfy that kind of demand with non-automotive options. So the second intuition of this research is the knowledge gap between rapid e-scooter influx and very few efficient management strategies to alleviate these negative impacts. So as we can see here, there was nearly 2 million trips generated in Austin last year, with over 1.5 billion vehicle miles traveled in Austin. And there are currently very limited number of dockless management studies from the scholarship. And the third intuition, which is a bit personal, is that I have a personal preference to car-free travel options, but the situation is very worrying. So these photos I took those photos in our in downtown and in our campus neighborhood. So as we can see, the improper parking and illegal usage in parks, that e-scooter vehicles are blocking our sidewalks. They are very irritating to some extent. So based on the intuitions, I came up with two research questions that this study will address. The first one is, what are the dockless mobility violations in Austin, and what are possible reasons to cause longer time to dispose them? And the second one is, where do the violations cluster? So the second research question focused on the geographic distribution of dockless vehicle violations. So the research data, we scraped over 4,000 shared mobility, shared micromobility to be more specific, violation reports through 311 system. So 311 system is a non-emergency municipal service request system. So basically, it's a lower priority version of 911. Yeah, and it claims that it has 3 channels with all day long service. So you can either make a phone call to submit a service request, or you can use web interface, or you can use the smartphone applications. And the data range we scraped was from April and to September this year. And the information of interest in this data set are timestamps, including the report submission time, report open time, and report close time, and also the geographic location of these violations, and also what type of the violation self-reported by a citizen. And also, in addition to the violation type, we also script the description provided by the reporter. And it also included the company involved. So if the vehicle is obstructing the sidewalk, what company should be responsible for that? And also, finally, we can get the information of through which method did the citizen submit that report. So some visualization results here. So the map on the left showed the whole distribution of dockless mobility violations in Austin region. There's a very light yellow region showing the service area of all private licensees in the Austin area that they can operate their business, dockless business, to be more specific. And also we zoomed in to the most dense area, so we can see there's some high density on the main campus, and the most dense area is along the riverbank of Colorado River. So we further extracted those violation concentrated area. So the first map is the University campus area. We can see the Guadalupe Strait, the San Antonio Strait, and the intersection of San Antonio Strait and West 24th Street is a concentrated area. And also the Zilker Metropolitan Park is also a concentrated area with multiple e-scooter violations. And also in downtown, we can see there's a clear belt distribution along the Colorado Riverbank, where there are a lot of trails and bike lanes for citizens to do recreational activities. And the first analysis we did is to test the response timeliness, meaning the time spent from a violation report is closed to a violation report is opened. So we can see the distribution, the density distribution of response timeliness is highly right skewed, so we cannot use the normal ANOVA test. And instead, we use the KW ANOVA test to release the assumptions of the dependent variables being normally distributed in the population. And the first comparison is the temporal pattern. So we can see from left to right is weekday morning, weekday afternoon, all the way to the weekend night. So we can see, as for the report volume, mornings are the time period when people are most likely to report a 311 dockless vehicle violation through 311 system. But interestingly, we can see weekend morning, when people submitted a violation report, it would probably take a longer time to respond due to maybe the private companies don't work on weekends, and the weekday mornings are the best time to submit a report. So if you want to report some violations in the future, I recommend you do that on weekday mornings. So moving forward, there are different types of violations that we focus on. From left to right, we have sidewalk obstruction and obstruction on parking lots and other public properties like fire hydrants or ADA ramps. And the third type of violation is damaged device, meaning the device isn't functional and it's kind of falling all over the place. The third type is device on private property. Maybe some dockless vehicles were left on private homes' lawns or driveways and is obstructing the homeowners. And the final type is the device in parks, which we can see only took up a relatively small amount of all violations. And also the obstructions on sidewalks and other public properties were the mostly reported, and the response time actually weren't that bad, because I presume news and novel stories are all talking about the e-scooters engulfing public space on sidewalks and public properties. So the government and the private companies take that more seriously. So they act quickly. But when some devices are parked in some parklands or trails, first, it's hard to timely dispose those violations, and second, maybe the city and the private companies, they just don't get enough attention. So finally, we can find someone to accuse of. So the first, these four companies, they contributed the most quantity of violations. So the Bird, Lime, Jump, and Lyft, which are also the four largest private licensees in Austin City. And we can see Lime is probably the most responsible, being that the response time is much higher than the other three. And finally, by comparing the reporting method, we can see a large quantity of people would submit a violation report through smartphone apps in Android system or Apple system. But a very small portion of people would make a phone call. But what is interesting about this figure is that although we can see more people using smartphone apps, the response time is much higher than phone calls, meaning there may be a mismatch between public participation and the efficient way to engage in that public participation. So the second analysis, which is the GIS hotspot analysis, showed the geographic distribution of violations based on their response timeliness. We conducted a spatial autocorrelation test before running a clustering analysis. We can see the largest group of violations are insignificant groups, meaning they are not clustered with any other violation reports. There are also some high clusters, meaning violations with high response times are clustered with other high response time violations. And let's just jump into the visualization results. So we can see there are two areas clustered with violation reports. The first area is UT campus. We can see there are some low response time clusters with few high response time outliers, the dark red dots on the map, as center. So the second larger area is the downtown, where located some low response time clustered, and also some outliers near high response outliers along the riverbank. Finally, we discussed some promises and challenges of using crowdsourcing as a data collection method to facilitate the triangular relationship of shared responsibility. And we also discussed the planner's role in this triangular relationship. So crowdsourcing local knowledge is a good way to generate innovative and practical solutions to local context. But the major challenge for urban planners is to use handy toolkits to unravel and legitimize the knowledge lurking inside public opinions. And the planner's responsibility to collect, accommodate, and respond to the public disagreement in an adaptive, proactive, and humane manner is what we thought could be valuable in the future management of dockless violations. So to be or not to be dockless, it's often asked in the micromobility field. So we propose two emerging technologies to analyze the crowdsourcing the data sets from crowdsourcing. So the natural language processing is a very advanced technology to analyze textual data, especially with a large amount of textual data that human researchers cannot personally look through all the descriptions and extract useful information from that large data pool. So we can use computer to help us to extract only useful information from the messy random knowledge. From that, we can hopefully beat the violations in the future. So let's keep e-scooter good for Austin. Thank you for listening. My presentation is over.
Thank you. A very hot topic, especially for us on campus. Does anybody have any questions?
Oh, I have a question actually.
Yep.
So thanks for the presentation. It's really impressive. But could you go to the visualization of the hotspot? No, of the hotspot of the Park.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just curious about. Yeah, that's one. It seems that there were hot points in the Metropolitan Park,
Mm-hmm.
and there were not a lot of 311 reports surround in the generally distributed in the Metropolitan Park. So do you think is there any reason for that?
I imagine. So I imagine there are some major parking lots or public transit facilities. So we can see from this map there's a transit hub near that area. So maybe the usage of e-scooters are high in that area, so that the misconduct are also concentrated in that area. Yeah.
So, do you know the exact location of the violation, like
Longitude.
Y coordinate?
Yeah, we have that kind of information.
Usually the data, I remember from my work on this, that the final two digits of the X and Y coordinates you cannot get. So all you get is kind of the
Aggregated.
area. Now
Okay.
you have the exact location.
Yes, because I think it's the design of 311 system. So when you submit a report, they use Google API to automatically locate your geographic location. So the XY coordinates are provided.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Then I guess I'm trying to follow your research focus here. So there are two things going on here. One is the location and the spatial patterns of the violations by different types or different
Response time.
not by time, just by type and location. And then the response time. Response is a kind of a response from the suppliers, right?
Not necessarily.
What do you mean by response?
So whenever a violation is reported, the city will first get the message and they will pass it to the private licensees. And within a time frame, if the private licensees don't respond to that violation and clean the vehicles out of the site, the city will chip in and clean the vehicles.
So the response time is defined between the time
The time,
city received report
yes,
and the time the
problem is solved
solved.
by either party.
So in that case, there are two players in terms of response time: the city
Mhm.
and then the supplier.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I guess my hunch is that reducing response time is not going to help in terms of the frequency and the distribution of violation.
Uh,
It's just kind of reducing the impact of that violation.
Mm-hmm.
but not necessarily people if they still just ride around and then throw away the vehicle or the e-scooters. They still do that.
Yes.
They're just reducing the potential risk or threats of the violations, but not reducing the violating behavior itself.
Yes.
Is that case? It's my kind of intuition.
So that's the kind of policy implication here. So from crowdsourcing public opinions, we can the city can get a better understanding of different kind of violations around the city, and maybe they can adjust the oversight over the private licensees so that the licensees are more responsible to clean the street and other public space. And further, so the responsibility now comes to the licensees part, and they can apply different strategies to notify the public. So how would you better use that dockless vehicles either by education or by some geofencing technology? So the licensees will remotely restrict the service zone. So if a vehicle enters a park, it will automatically remotely disconnect it.
Right. Yeah, I remember when I was riding a doctor's bicycle in China, I returned the bike over there, and then suddenly I received messages in that please return the bike to the designated parking area.
Yes.
Otherwise, you have to pay extra $5 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So meaning that they know the exact location of the vehicle. So that addressed the violation behavior.
Yeah.
But so far, at this moment, you have not gone into that step yet.
No, we can have that kind of intuitions, but we cannot propose a very specific strategy for licensees to let the public know how to perform better. And
the 311 data use to be very interesting.
Yeah.
I do not want to kind of dominate it, taking all the time we have here. You may want to ask around who have used ductless scooter.
I was curious about that.
And who have not parked in the right places.
I think they are more strict about parking now. So if you ride a scooter, for example, to a bus stop, you cannot park near the bus stop. They have that kind of geofencing near the bus stops. So, which can be good or bad because the companies advertise their products as being a good way to connect transit, but when they apply that kind of geofencing strategy, it undermines the public usage. Yeah.
Exactly how does the geofencing work? You get an email or a text that says you're going to be fined, you left it in the wrong place?
Good question. So this is the most state of art in managing dockless mobility. So geofencing is more like it's based on a GPS system, and when it has a GPS receiver on each device, and whenever you come in a restricted zone, the vehicle will be remotely disconnected, and also you will get a warning message on your application. So
disconnected is pointless. So you're at a bus stop, you're not supposed to leave it there. They disconnect it. That's stupid.
Yeah, so that's a different case. So if you want to park near a bus stop, for example, you cannot lock the vehicle, and the price for you to pay is continuing increasing. So
That makes sense.
that's not beneficial.
By disconnected, do you mean that I've never rode one.
The battery is down.
So
Yeah.
it stops.
Yeah.
Do you know when this regulation? No, do you know when this regulation publishing about the bus stop?
Yeah, so the geofencing policy for campus area, I think it published in June this year, so this summer. But I don't know if the city applied the same strategy at the same time. Yeah.
So did you compare the violations before June or after June? Are there any differences in us of like violation
Yeah,
frequencies?
that's a really good question. I didn't think about that, but I will. Thank you.
That's why we like to have these discussions.
Yeah.
Do you have enough data before and after?
Yeah, the data range is from April to September this year, so perfect time.
Did the violations for jump include the dockless bikes as well as the
Yes,
scooters?
so it's for all dockless vehicles, including e-bikes and e-scooters. But the e-bikes are relatively small amount. So there are over 4,000 violations. Only less than 50 reports were on e-bikes, so mostly e-scooters in this data set.
Maybe one or more questions, and then we can move to the next presenter. Questions or comments?
Is there any way to know the socio-demographic profile of the people who submit these reports?
I don't know, but I doubt there will be because it.
I'm interested in whether there will be any difference between different people that submit those reports.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe certain people, like young people, or are more active in using those scooters, more alert about the violations, and they may submit the reports more often.
Yeah.
And also for the distribution of the reports, spatial distribution of these 311 violation reports, could there be any relationship between how many people are using those streets, or how those streets are used with the frequency of those reports?
Yeah. Actually, I think in the future we will overlay the e-scooter usage distribution on the violation distribution, so that we can see whether there's a pattern between heavily used street segments are also reported the most. Yeah.
If we could, last semester, a student in my class, she was working on this as well, Sanika. If you can access the exact XY coordinates of the vehicles, the e-scooters, you could actually map out and against the geographic layer to see whether or not the e-scooters are located in the legal or illegal places. In this case, here, reported violation. Are there any like a false reporting?
Yes, actually a lot.
Right.
Yeah,
so
that's
it's not exactly the violation, but they say, well, it's a violation, and that's one. Another one is the reported violation location by the reporter, but not necessarily the exact location of the violation.
Yeah.
Right. So then it matters in how you extract the geolocation of the reports by photo, by the phone location, where if you call location of the phone. I guess probably if you really dig into the information, you want to clarify that.
Okay.
Right. So I report that. I can call right now. Hey, there's a violation.
Yeah.
But it's right here. My phone's here.
Yeah.
The violation's out there. So.
Yeah, that's the major limitation of this data set, because we can't get the real-time location of violations. Rather, we can only get the reporter's location at that time.
Companies.
But they won't share the information.
That's why the also the data set only is scrapped.
Isn't that the problem with most crowdsourcing?
Yeah.
It's very hard to get socio-demographic data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
On the callers, on who's ever
Yeah.
Or even the exact location of the vehicle.
Well, but, I drive by something and I'm on the phone driving, reporting that there's a homeless person who looks like he's collapsed or whatever. I don't know anything about me, but I know where I call from.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, very interesting. Exploring this new data source and new behavior, right?
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Thank you.
I forgot to mention that Shunhua is a PhD candidate. I mentioned that he's engineering. So,
Oh,
and
yeah.
now we're
HTML 吗？
Hello everyone. Today I'm going to present my research for this semester titled as Benchmark the Trends of Spatial Inequality in Megaregions and Explore the Roles of High-Speed Rail. So this presentation will be in the following 5 parts: the introduction, the background, methods, study results, and the conclusions. So first, introduction. So spatial inequality denotes the unequal distribution of resources and opportunities over an area of natural and built environment. And among many strategies to reduce spatial inequality, investing in major transportation infrastructure has been a common one. And parallel to the growing interest of inducing spatial inequality, there are worldwide attention to the phenomenon of megaregions. So this paper will benchmark the spatial inequality at megaregion level based on the existing data and literatures. Here are some general study of spatial inequality. First, the theoretical concept. The theoretical concept derived from the economic discipline, where in 1950s, scholars found that there is an inverted U-shaped pattern showing how the inequality grew over the time. And they found that there's economic convergence and divergence over the time, which means at a lower developed status, the regions tend to diverge based on their economic status, and after that, the inequality gap tend to shrink when the underdeveloped region kept on. And there are also discussions on this spatial inequality. Scholars find the positive and negative effect of spatial inequality. And some scholars in geography also found the spatial autocorrelation of this inequality. And there are also empirical studies in like US and China income inequality based on the past half a century. And my second part of literature focuses on the high-speed rail impact on spatial inequality. And there are some inequality issues such as the polarization effect derived by the high-speed rail as a transportation infrastructure. And there are also competition between conventional rail and high-speed rail, which cause the differences in inequality. And it also causes the regional disparity. And there are other issues caused by high-speed rail, such as the redistribution of the economic activities and the polycentricity among megaregions. So my research goals has 2 parts. The first, the study aims to benchmark the spatial inequality condition and the trends of megaregion in the multiple continents. For this research, there are 38 megaregions in US, China, and Northwest Europe. And under this topic, I will have spatial inequality measurement based on economic activities and the inter-megaregion and intra-megaregion comparison. Secondly, this study explores the effects of major transportation investment in reshaping spatial inequality of megaregions. And I include 3 case studies here, one in US as a Texas Triangle megaregion, one in China as the Mid-Yangtze River City Cluster, and one in UK as Northern Powerhouse megacity region. And under this topic, I will explore how high-speed rail affects the inequality of accessibility. The background of the data and megaregions applied in this study. Here's like a global map of the megaregions that applied in my research. So in US, the history of megaregion can be traced back to 1961 when Jane Gottman defined megalopolis from like Boston to Washington on the northeast coast of US. And after that, there are multiple scholars worked on the concept of megaregions. And after 2000, there are several scholars or organizations defined the nationwide megaregions such as RPA, Robert Long, Rachel Florida, Catherine Ross, and in 2013, US DOT also gave sort of the official definition of megaregions. And in my research, I applied the 11 megaregions defined by the RPA, the Regional Plan Association. And in Europe, the history of megacity region, which is the same level as megaregion, the terminology used in US, it is the first detected by Peter Hall and Cather Pei in 2006. And at that time, they defined 8 megacity regions based on the economic connectivity and the technology firm connections. But in my paper, I applied one more megacity region, the Northern Powerhouse, which is defined by the UK government, and they have supported transportation policy. So in China, the city cluster, what is called city cluster, is similar to the megaregion in US. It is like a very top-down policy, which is first issued in the 11th five-year plan as economic development zones, and in the 13th fifth-year plan, they call it city cluster. And in this paper, I include 19 city clusters defined by the 13th fifth-year plan in China. So here are some background information about the 11 megaregions in US, the 9 megacity region in Northwest Europe, and the 19 city clusters in China. Here's a global comparison about the population density and area, a scale comparison. And then the 3 cases I used for the high-speed rail analysis. First is in Texas Triangle, which includes 66 counties, and there are 2 proposed high-speed rail lines for now, one from San Antonio to Fort Worth, Dallas, and one from Fort Worth, Dallas to Houston. And there are 11 proposed stations, and the whole region includes 7 MPOs. The next case, the Northern Powerhouse, is in north of England. It includes 36 NUTS 3 region, which is the finest statistical units that I could find so far in the UK's case. And they also have 2 proposed high-speed rail phases. One is from the London to the north, which connects Sheffield to Leeds, and the London to Manchester. Another is the high-speed 3, which is like a horizontal line from Liverpool to Leeds and to the York. The third case in China, the Meiyang River, which has the 28 prefectures. For now, there are 3 built high-speed rail lines forming a triangle network, and there are more than 20 built high-speed rail stations. So the conceptual framework of this research, first on the topic of trends of spatial inequality across megaregions, I used 38 megaregions across continents, and I compared their inequality based on the indicators of income and employment. And the method I used, the descriptive analysis, was longitudinal data. And on the second part, the effect of a high-speed rail in reshaping spatial inequality in megaregions, I applied 3 case studies in Texas Triangle, Northern Powerhouse, Meiyang River, and I used the indicators as the economic data and also the mobility and accessibility data. And the method uses a case study before and after the build or the proposal of the high-speed rail. The measurement I used to measure spatial inequality include the spatial Gini coefficient, the coefficient of variance, and the rank size. The spatial Gini coefficient measures the unequal distribution of wealth among geographic units within a region, and coefficient of variance measures the disparity of the indicators by its variance. And rank size measures the polycentricity among megaregions in a megaregion among different metropolitans. And the measurement of mobility and accessibility. The first mobility is measured by average travel time of a city to other cities within a megaregion, and the lower mobility means, lower number mean, It's a typo, just ignore it. The accessibility measures to what extent do people in region I are exposed to economic opportunities in other cities within a megaregion. It is calculated by a gravity model by summing up economic attraction divided by travel time. The result of the first part, spatial inequality in global megaregions. So here in the US, we can see that the Northern California, the northeast coast, and the Gulf Coast, there's relatively high spatial inequality, while in like Southern California, Sun Corridor, and Florida, the spatial inequality is relatively low. And here's like a statistical comparison. And in the case of Europe, the Southeast England, which is the Greater London area, and the Paris region has a relatively high spatial inequality, while the Northern Powerhouse and Randstad, where the megaregion has the more polycentric feature, the spatial inequality is relatively low. In the case of China, the Jing-Jin-Ji area, which is the capital zone among Beijing, and the Pearl River Delta include the cities like Guangzhou and Shenzhen, it has relatively high spatial inequality, while like the peripheral area like Tianshan North Ridge and Hachang city cluster has relatively low spatial inequality. So to summarize the spatial inequality trends in 38 megaregions, I have two dimensions. First is the spatial comparison. I found that Chinese megaregions show the highest spatial inequality among 3 continents. Notably, in 2016, the average Gini coefficient of 19 megaregion coefficient was reported at 0.2. In the United States, the 11 megaregions average reported Gini index value of 0.1, and average of EU's Gini is 0.15. The temporal comparison in China, 14 of 19 city clusters experienced a decline of income inequality from 2006 to 2016, while in Europe, the trend from 2013 to 2016, it shows an improvement of income spatial inequality. And in the US, 8 of 11 megaregions saw the rising income inequality from 2010 to 2016. So the starting time is not the same because of that I could not have very sufficient data, but I try to control 2016 as an anchor point that all the regions have the data of this time. The result for the second part, the inequality of accessibility. Here's a map showing the before and after accessibility based on the high-speed proposal in the Texas Triangle, and the data is based on 2010-2016. So we can see that after the proposed high-speed rail lines and high-speed stations, there are 13 counties that has a notable increase of accessibility. And here's the comparison of Northern Powerhouse based on the proposed high-speed rail lines. And we can see that the central metropolitan, the Leeds, has the most notable increase of accessibility. And here's a case of Meiyangtze River. It shows the most significant increase of accessibility among the 3 cases. So one, probably because here there's already built high-speed rail lines, and also because the time period is like a 10-year comparison from 2006 to 2016. This is the data showing the change between and after high-speed rail in the 3 cases based on the Gini coefficient test and the CV test for inequality. So to summarize this part, I tried to find what matters in the change of accessibility inequality under the effect of high-speed rail. And I found two reasons. First, the existing mobility conditions. So in the European countries with long history of rail-based mobility services, the rail upgrade offers an incremental improvement to the magnitude of accessibility inequality. And in US, where personal mobility is high based on the car ownership, high-speed rail offers mobility improvement to a particular market segment. While in China, where personal mobility has been relatively low, high-speed rail leads to major mobility elevation while shrink the inequality gap. And second is the scale of real network extension that matters. The polarization and corridor concentration dominant when high-speed rail occurs in a few number of cities and regions corridors. As multiple corridors form a network, high-speed railroad to reduce spatial inequality will expand. So my conclusion of this whole research based on the two parts. First, the megaregion offers a new spatial approach to address spatial inequality. Megaregions across jurisdictional or multinational boundaries in Europe case. Megaregional approach to spatial inequality helps uncover the disparity between fast-growing, affluent core cities and the bypass underperforming communities in the region. Secondly, high-speed rail elevates mobility by reducing travel time, yet its role in reducing spatial inequality is contingent on the geographic coverage of high-speed rail network, the pre-existing level of mobility of the served region, and the integrity with other transportation systems to reach non-high-speed rail locations. That's all.
We have about 10 minutes for questions or comments.
How do you handle price?
Price?
The price of the fare?
Uh,
Costs money to use the system, right?
Yeah, for
Well, let me say another thing. There's a lot of literature about how high-speed rail or rail improvements in developing countries disadvantage women instead of advantaging them because they can't afford the rail fare. So their condition becomes relatively worse relative to men who get paid more, have access to higher paying jobs, and that in the World Bank is very concerned about this in the East Asia Bank and so forth, that some of these rail systems actually disadvantage women because of the fare. They can't pay the fare. And there's a very famous incident, some of you may know, in India, where folks were forcibly moved to the outskirts of the city, but a rail system was put in, yet the women couldn't afford the fare, so the unemployment among women went up 80%, but only 13% for men, because they could afford the fares. So clearly that has something to do with spatial inequality. How have you handled that in your model?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, because for what I have for now, I do not include the socioeconomic data. I only do a general comparison with all the population that I could have. But I think that's a really good point because there is a disparity among certain group of people. So that could probably be my next part to dig into this topic on the inequality. Yeah.
So your unit of analysis is a city?
It's different in 3 regions, as I stated. In US, it's very obvious at county level, and in China, it's the prefecture, which is 地级市. Yeah, and in the UK, I use the NUS3, which is a statistical unit to do census. So the NUS3 data is maintained by the Eurostat. So it's like a European data set. And so because last week I presented this at a conference in Pittsburgh, and one of the comments is that in UK, I could actually use the better data because the UK government, they actually maintains the more detailed data rather than NUS3. So that's a sort of step that I will do further. Yeah.
I guess my another question is spatial inequality a bad thing? Like if you compare between city level income, so like some of the jobs they're just gonna concentrate it in one city or in one specific area. So is this spatial inequality between cities a bad thing?
Yeah, that's also a really good question. I stated at the very beginning in the literature review that there are actually different opinions on spatial inequality. So in the paper in Kim and Wei, they all stated that there are positive and negative effects of spatial inequality. Yes, also said some people, some cities may have like more job opportunity based on their, like maybe they have high-speed station, maybe they have better transportation infrastructure. So that's why I feel that the measurement of economic indicators are the not only indicators that to measure spatial inequality. That's why we include the accessibility inequality later, because it's considered not only the like economic attraction of this region, but also the accessibility to the surrounding regions.
Can you go back to the comparison for the three cases? The result comparison of China. I found it, yeah.
This one.
No, the three paragraphs that you stated, the spatial inequality of three continents. The U.S., the European, about the income. I think that's kind of counterintuitive to me, because you concluded that in China the income gap actually shrunk over the time, but in the U.S. case and the European case, they actually more diverged. But I think China is still a developing country and is supposed to have larger income gap rather than smaller. Why is that?
Can you point which sentence I think is countered your intuitive?
I think because it's the comparison within a region, right? A mega region. So it's not like between East and West Coast.
No. It's like each mega region has a number which shows the inequality of this region.
So out of 19 city clusters, 14 experienced a decline in income inequality. But in Europe and in the US, actually some mega regions are the income inequality are rising. Is that the case?
Yeah, that is what data show. So I can explain why China because as we stated in China, the inequality gap is actually shrink. For what I could explain is that people in underdeveloped region, they are actually catching up. That's my.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, if the data says this way, it should be. Yeah.
But still, I mean, I could not explain why 8 of 11 mega regions in US saw the rising of income inequality. I don't think I have that knowledge to explain this phenomenon. Yeah.
So I try to stay quiet, be as critical as possible, please. Ignore my presence here. Challenges like that, right? Why is that case? Or this the gender inequality issue that Dr. Rosenberg just mentioned. That.
I heard there are some studies looking at, in China's case, so you have stations in one city but not in another city. Right?
Yeah.
So I think there are studies saying that if you have a high-speed rail line across your city but doesn't have a stop in the city, this will disadvantage the city. So I'm wondering
Yes, that's
if
true.
your data can show some insights on that.
So for now, I feel that. So for example, in the Smejiang River case, I don't know if it's because that from 2006 to 2016, for each city, the economic actually growth. So it's actually showing like everyone is better off case. But I do not know if I dig into this case that I could find some disparity for people with stations and with non-stations. Because I feel at this level, it's still very rough to see very like detailed comparisons among each prefectures. But I think what you said is it will probably happen. Yeah.
We have about 4 more minutes.
So after you did all the research and all the analysis, maybe do you have a hunch which case has divergence case or which case has convergence case?
In China's case, so for the accessibility, I think in China's case is more like convergence because this data actually shows the change between and after the inequality of accessibility.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So with high-speed rail system built in different regions, in China, different cities will have more similar accessibility, right? Is that the interpretation of your analysis? So before the high-speed rail, cities are unequal in terms of accessibility and employment by large, but after you establish a high-speed rail system, the cities will be more equal. And in the US and in the European case,
but there are multiple ways to explain it, because in China's case, the high-speed rail line is actually not the same as the conventional rail line, which means it created new stations. The new high-speed rail stations that does not have like rail station at all. But in the in Northern Powerhouse case, they actually upgrade so they do not create new stations, which means the places where have better accessibility will have much better accessibility. That's why it has like larger inequality. And in US case, the 2 proposed lines is already based on 2 interstation highway. So that's why it's kind of exaggerate. Yeah.
I guess we'll wrap up at this point. Thank you. Did you have another comment?
Well, the chief's done. Then I try to be picky. 2 general comments here for both of you. One, when you present the chief, face the audience. You keep reading the screen. Sometimes you do need to refer to the screen, just like the weather forecast. Right? they do this even. And they can see kind of a mirror. They can see that their hands actually were moving around. But look at this. But most of the time, you should communicate with the audience rather than reading the screen and then ignoring that. Just like you are answering the question, so you're communicating with them.
Mm-hmm.
So this, I guess, lesson I learned the hard way as well.
Mm-hmm.
So this suggestion applies to everybody in your class presentations, conference presentations. And I guess in that sense, Shunhua did slightly better. But a picky note for Shunhua, on your very first slide, and you are CM2 GRA. So everybody, when you present your work, CM2 sponsor, do credit to CM2, please. And you're promoting Urban Information Lab, totally fine with me, but do not ignore CM2. All right, okay, I'm just, because our CM2 is a community. We need everybody to care about this, to promote this as well, together with Urban Information Lab and other labs as well.
You might also come to the back of the room and try to see your own slide. I can't see.
Okay. Then the color is to
it's a big, well, partially it's the light, but that's what you're living with, right? So I cannot see
The
the
size of the
numbers on
font,
it.
the size of the font. is
You need to make the fonts bigger and put less stuff on.
That's all from me.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks to everybody for coming. Good luck to our students who have finals, and good luck to our professors who have lots of grading.